No internet. No mobile phones. No streaming. No video games. 3 television channels that shut down before midnight. And yet ask anyone who was a teenager in 1970s Britain if they were bored and they'll look at you as if you've lost your mind. Here's the thing nobody talks about. It wasn't that kids were somehow different. The whole country was built differently. The streets, the buildings, the bus routes, the prices, the rules. Everything was arranged so that a 14-year-old with 50 pence in their pocket had more freedom than most adults have today. And almost all of it has been knocked down, sold off, or simply no longer exists. So what changed? And why does nobody talk about it? Start with Thursday. In the 1970s, Thursday was the most important day of the week if you were young and cared about music. That was the day the music papers arrived at the newsagent, NME, Melody Maker, Sounds. These weren't just magazines. They were how you found out about everything. You'd walk in after school, hand over about 12 pence, and leave with a paper that smelled of cheap ink. The print came off on your fingers and stayed there all evening. You didn't care. You were too busy scanning the tour dates in the back pages, checking if anyone decent was coming to the local Odeon or the town hall, reading reviews of albums you couldn't afford yet, studying photographs of bands whose haircuts you'd try to copy by Friday. This was your internet before the internet existed, except it turned up once a week on paper and you had to dig for everything yourself. There was no scrolling, no endless feed. You read it cover to cover, then you lent it to your mate, who lent it to his mate, and by Monday it was creased and falling apart and everyone had an opinion about what was in it. Speed up. The spread of a paper through town was quick. Arguments started on the letters page and lasted days. Someone slagging off your favorite band felt like a personal attack. You had to write back, handwritten on lined paper, posted with a stamp, and wait weeks to see if they printed it. The classified ads in the back carried second-hand guitars, pen pals, and fan clubs you could join for a postal order and a stamped, addressed envelope. That single 12 pence purchase shaped your whole week. It gave you something to do, somewhere to go, something to talk about. From Thursday's paper, you took that information down to the record shop. Every town had at least one. Some had 3 or 4. These shops were nothing like the modern high street. They were small rituals. Dark and a little dusty, floor-to-ceiling wooden racks filled with vinyl. The smell of cardboard sleeves and cigarette smoke. The crucial thing was the listening booth, a small wooden box with a glass window, a turntable, and heavy headphones on a coiled cord. You'd take a record from the rack, hand it to the bloke behind the counter, the one who always looked like he hadn't slept since 1968, and he'd put it on for you. Then you stood in that booth, headphones clamped to your ears, nodding along, deciding whether this 45 pence single was worth a week's pocket money. Slow, pause on numbers, because that's what it cost. A 7-inch single was about 45 pence in the mid-1970s. An album was closer to £3. These were serious decisions when your weekly spending money might be £1 if you were lucky. You didn't buy music on impulse. You thought about it for days, saved up for it, and when you finally spent your money you played the record until you knew every second by heart. Every purchase mattered. Every song meant something. But the real secret to teenage freedom in the 1970s wasn't just the music. It was the bus. Britain in the 70s was a bus society. Towns and cities were linked by routes that ran regularly, cheaply, and late enough to get you home after dark. The buses were part of the landscape, double-deckers like the Bristol VRT and the Leyland Atlantean, rumbling machines that smelled of diesel and cigarette smoke. Fares were almost nothing. In places like South Yorkshire, a child's fare could be as low as 2 pence. Even elsewhere, a short journey rarely cost more than 5 pence or 10 pence. For the price of a bag of crisps, a 14-year-old could travel miles from home. No parent needed to drive them. The back seat on the top deck was the VIP lounge, feet up on the seat in front, looking out over rooftops, heading across town because someone said the chip shop was better on the other side, or because a girl from school got off at that stop, or because the record shop by the bus station had a sale. The bus conductor came upstairs, issued your ticket from that little machine strapped to his chest, and then left you to it. Nobody asked where you were going or why. Nobody rang your parents. You were a paying passenger, even if you'd only paid 5 pence, and that was that. Your territory wasn't just your street, it was your entire city. That felt like freedom, and it made every day hold something. From the bus you could head to the youth club. Nearly every town and estate had one. Council-funded, open 2 or 3 evenings a week, staffed by adults who mostly left you alone unless someone started a fight. The buildings were rarely glamorous. Prefab huts, church halls, brutalist concrete boxes with strip lighting and condensation on the windows. Inside, entry cost about 10 pence. For that you got a table tennis table with a chip surface and a ball that didn't bounce straight, a tuck shop selling Mars bars and bags of Smith's crisps with a little blue sachet of salt inside, sometimes a pool table, sometimes a record player, and, always, other teenagers. These places were rough around the edges. Walls painted magnolia, plastic chairs, buzzing lights, radiators that made more noise than heat. Someone had stuck a poster of David Bowie on the wall and nobody had taken it down. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it was yours, a space away from parents and teachers where you could be young for a couple of hours, play records, talk rubbish, show off, lean against the wall and try to look cool. You learned things school didn't teach you: how to lose at pool without sulking, how to handle someone bigger being annoying, how to read a room, how to dance badly in front of people and survive the embarrassment. You learned all of that by simply being there. Then there was the cinema, not the multiplex experience we know now, with its £12 tickets and buckets of popcorn. The 1970s cinema was something else. A single screen, velvet seats that had seen better decades, an usherette with a torch, prices that would sound made up today. Saturday morning pictures were a tradition that dated back decades. Children packed into the local cinema for cartoons, serials, and old adventure films. The noise was deafening, hundreds of kids shouting, throwing things, singing along to the bouncing ball on screen. At their busiest, nearly 2,000 British cinemas ran these Saturday morning shows, with over 800,000 children attending every week. The cost was pennies. Even the evening screenings were cheap. A ticket in the mid-70s might cost 50 pence, and many cinemas still ran double bills, 2 films for the price of 1. 4 hours in a warm, dark room for less than £1. An entire evening sorted. A date even, if you were brave enough to sit next to someone you fancied and hope your hand ended up next to theirs on the armrest. From the cinema to the streets, the chip shop, the park, the corner where everyone gathered, the bus shelter where you stood even when it wasn't raining, simply because it was the meeting point. These things sound small, but they were everything. A bag of chips cost about 10 pence. You bought one bag, sat on a wall with your legs dangling, shared it between 3 of you and talked for an hour. About music, about who fancied who, about whether the youth club had been any good last Tuesday. Often about nothing at all, but it filled the time and it felt like it mattered. The vinegar soaked through the paper and the warmth kept your hands going on a cold night. Parks had no locked gates after dark. Playing fields were open. Waste ground was everywhere. Nobody fenced it off or put up health and safety signs. The countryside began where the houses ended and you could walk into it without paying or asking permission. Football happened on any flat surface, jumpers for goalposts, arguments about whether it went in. Cricket took place on any patch of dry ground, with a bat taped together twice already. You played until it got dark and then a bit longer, because nobody was checking the time. So what happened to all of it? The music papers, the youth clubs, the cheap buses, the record shops, the cinemas that let you in for 50 pence? The answer is not complicated. It was dismantled piece by piece over about 20 years. The VCR arrived in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Entertainment began to move from the street into the bedroom. Then came home computers, then game consoles, each one drawing teenagers further indoors, further away from each other. The institutions that kept those streets alive started to close. Youth clubs shuttered. Government spending on youth services was cut, and not gradually. Between 2011 and 2021 alone, 95% of local councils cut their youth budgets by at least a quarter.